Yahweh, we stand in awe, thanksgiving, praise, and worship as we draw into the holy presence of your Spirit, breathing deep into the life-giving breath that is the Abun, your Spirit within us. The very breath of your Spirit manifesting life within each and every one of us, emerging from the very beginnings of ourselves, expanding to stir our body, to bring air of the earth into our lungs. But we know that it is you first that is life within us. We trust you and embrace you above the thoughts of our minds, and we welcome in your holy name, Yahweh Elohim Aton Minei Susipiandro, the triune form that is Yah, Yeshua, Abun. We submit ourselves before you now for this time of learning and seeking and trusting in your divine grace to flow through this moment, to extend your favor upon this time through both wisdom, clarity, peace, and understanding. We breathe as one in you. And for all of you who are present and all who will be listening, as you know, over these past probably 2.5 months, we've just been engaging in the deeper teachings within Grace Healing. Reaching this past week, we went into the 10 great words. And I really hope that you might consider returning to last week's recording and really center in on the 10 great words to understand that if you look at them in the context of the 10 great words, they're not individual statements applying to individual relational encounters. Each and every single statement of the 10 great words is supportive of one to another, and every single one affects every type of relational dynamic you can encounter. And I think it's important to remember that God is perfect wisdom, perfect clarity, perfect order, all things pointing back into one thing, God's presence within. It all reveals the nature of God's Spirit. One of the things that I witness many times when I'm in prayer with people, or if I've encountered different people with different religious beliefs and different experiences throughout their lives through different spiritual awakenings or anthropological understandings where they've studied aspects of mankind and looking back into history to understand how man has functioned and repeated the nature of history over and over and over again. My personal view in that is people honestly do not center and measure their thoughts, words, and awarenesses against the nature of God. Do they raise them up and hold them up to God and say, is this belief I've embraced actually support a perfect, loving, ever-living, pure God, omnipresent, omnipotent in every aspect of the being? And in me, I kind of break it down simply to the fact that if it does not align with the nature of God's presence, I'm not to embrace it. I do set it aside. And there are so many things that we witness within religions, so many things that we witness within political standings of corporate world, world governments, different things that are unfolding now, and they espouse certain things, or they expect certain things, or they demand upon other nations demands of expectations or things they place upon another. And honestly, if we truly believe what we believe, I mean, even from a Christian platform or a Buddhist platform or any of them that speak the nature of divinity being pure, perfect, and limitless, well, what in the human experience emulates that? Very little. So when we start to latch on to certain beliefs and feel that we must change people with this belief, can we honestly say that this belief we have chosen is of the perfect God, or is it something of a religious or corporate standing that separates us from one to another. What I mean by that is if we embrace a belief that does not align with the perfect nature of loving, pure, perfect God, then we are embracing something that is obviously formed of man to justify his place, to justify his ownership over certain logic or understanding. And in my humble opinion, that forms divide. And God is not the spirit of division. And I say it that way for a specific reason. When we speak of the deeper teachings within grace healing, people have lost sight of the nature of what is going on in a spiritual nature throughout this earth. When Yeshua said, each and everything you see manifested upon this earth that is corrupt or somehow not in the state of revealing God's presence, it is spiritual in nature. When they speak to his journey into the order of principalities, when he was drawn from the cross, he was torn apart, ripped open, and crucified upon the cross. But then as he surrendered his spirit into God's embrace, his spirit left the cross and entered into the belly of the dead, as it was named, or the spiritual realm, or the order of principalities. And in that, we are talking about him entering the prison, because that's the way it's described in a couple different places. As he entered the prison, he took from Lucifer the keys to the heavens. In other words, the ability to create, the ability to manifest any form of power or order over anything of the winds of the earth or the lower heavens. Yeshua took from him the keys to the heavens, then ministered unto the dead, the prisoners, the captives within the prison. And here we upon this earth have come here to do greater things than Yeshua, yet we have not over the past 2,000 years because we have lost sight of the order of the heavens and how they function with one another. And when Yeshua said that everything you see of corruption that manifests upon this earth begins first in the order of principalities, the spiritual realm, he is talking to the nature of the captives, that he said that you must set the captives free. Those that were within the prison that he entered upon when he left the cross. We're talking about the spiritual realm that governs all things that do not align with the attributes of God. So again, if it's perfect in alignment with the nature of God's Spirit, you will know that it magnifies, reveals, and points toward the perfect nature of God. If it does not, it is pointing toward the captives held within the prison, the order of principalities, the spiritual realm. And as I shared last week as we were talking in the early stages of the phone call, it was to understand the importance of when you see somebody governed in anger. This is not a human being that is angry. This is a spiritual influence of anger manifesting within the human. And it is not a spirit that holds divine awareness. It is not a spirit that holds self-awareness. It merely manifests as we name it. So if we choose anger to partake in, or to express upon another individual, we are choosing to separate ourselves from the nature of God's presence. And we are embracing something not of the pure and perfect nature. We are embracing one of the captives held within prison, the order of principalities, the spiritual realm. That is why when you listen to the video and the audio about Andy's story, not our beloved Andy that helps us so much with the internet and everything, but an Andy that I served a number of years ago that was dying in a jail of an overdose when they thought he was just a public drunk. 67 spirits released from his body, and he went from high jaundice condition, bloodshot and jaundiced eyes, so intensely bloodshot that all you saw was a black dot, red and yellow. There was no color left to his eyes, which he used to have blue eyes prior to this. So in my understanding, I am not a doctor. I am not a medical practitioner. But to see the yellow and the green pallor within the skin, his kidneys were failing. His liver had failed. The bloodshot within the eyes was a sign that his organs were beginning to shut down and his blood pressure was increasing so high, pumping, vacillating through his body to the point of death. Any medical practitioner would tell you that there's nothing you can do at this point because, again, he was many hours into processing these toxins through his body. However, me and my ignorance, having no clue of what God wanted me to do, felt the only thing I have to extend to my brother was prayer. And as I finally got his attention and had him pick up the phone, as I was talking through the phone with the glass wall separating us, we prayed. And with 67 individual captives freed from this individual, his eyes were pure white with the blue returned to his eyes. His pupils were perfectly balanced and ordered according to the light of the room, and he was clear and able to speak openly when I asked, what do you feel now, after we went down to the litany of the 67 individual spirits, and he looked at me through the glass and said over the phone, hopeful. To me, that's an attribute in the nature of God, for him to shift from this dark place, touching upon the spirit of death, to a place of life manifesting within his body, and him sitting there on the other side of a glass wall where I couldn't touch him. There was nothing I could do for him but engage in the presence of God within him. Not within me, because God already blessed me to be present in that moment. Of course God's presence was within me. But I was called to speak prayers for my brother through the telephone thing to stir God's presence from within him, since he had become blinded to it. And when those 67 captives were freed from his body, meaning his soul, meaning his flesh, remember the Aramaic word describing flesh within humanity is speaking to the soul. So you have spirit, flesh, body. Spirit, soul, and body. Resident within his flesh was the influence of 67 individual spirits known through generational abuse, angers and unforgiveness, hatred, hostility, aggression, confusion, many spirits present within. These were the captives known within the prison, the order of principalities, the spiritual realm. And as I was shown a vision when I was younger, awakening to this understanding, God had showed me a number of different visions throughout my awakening. And there were times where I saw thousands of people being healed in the utterance of God's name. Yahweh, Elohim, Atuni, Menes, Besuri, Menene, Yeshua, Avun, Solebab, Turukerim, Yah. In the mere utterance of God's name, that thousands of people would be healed, where he would show me these people extended out in rooms. After that, however, I was shown an image of individuals serving within Grace Healing, standing upon a stage, myself and others as well. And as we looked into the room, God showed a room with exactly 1,000 people in it. And they were numbered 1 to 1,000. And I'm thinking to myself, well, God's shown many thousands being healed. Why is it numbered 1 to 1,000? As I meditated upon this and sought God's presence and kept releasing the image back to God, because I do not hold them possessed within me. Each thing that I am shown by the grace of God, I return to God, because I would rather rest within God's embrace, not my thoughtful intellect. I would not like to imprison it within myself. I want it to continue to flow as God intends it to be. So I return it to God's holy embrace. And in that, this awareness entered my thoughts that said, as you look upon the 1,000 and utter my name, you will see thousands upon the 1,000 healed. Listen to that. As you gaze upon the 1,000 that stand before you, numbered 1 to 1,000, and you utter my name, speak my name out loud, you will see thousands upon the 1,000 healed. If you understand the nature of what I just said, let's imagine that we had 1,000 people in the room and they were all Andy. So we have Andy times 1,000, filled with 67 individual spirits, known from the abuses of the past, the wrongs that were done, the judgments that were cast upon him, the critical spirits that came against him, the hostility and aggression that he used to protect himself while in a jail. These separate individual spiritual forms, so what would happen in that moment of uttering God's holy name, not standing in judgment, but standing within God's pure and perfect love, you would look out over this crowd, and you would see in the midst of that one utterance of God's name, 67,000 captives freed into the fullness of God's loving embrace. Now, please bear with me. I know it's not going to be in that respect that every person will be dealing with 67. Some will be dealing with hundreds. Some will be dealing with legions. Some will be dealing with very smaller numbers because they're further along the path of purification and they're moving more clearly within God's path and they are not as heavily influenced. But we are still encountering them daily. We walk into a store or into a restaurant or whatever, and we see people in frustration. We embrace frustration within ourselves. We still come upon these spiritual revelations. And it's not to control us or to diminish us. Each and every time we encounter something of a spiritual nature, we are poised with the power of God's love within us to bring healing and restoration, not to end up subjected to it. If we encounter the situation that fosters grief, we are going to walk through the emotions of it, but we can release the spirit of grief and walk through that emotional experience with God's presence, not the spiritual influence of grief. We can embrace the holy presence of God to be comforted in God's presence and moved to a clearer and deeper understanding. As you know, last week was the memorial service for my mother, on Monday, and then we were in the prayer call later, but if you can understand the importance of releasing the spiritual influence, I will guarantee you that you will be gifted in the awarenesses that foster life, not death. You will remember and know, as you're on the path of God's presence, what it is, that there is no power of death over anybody anymore. It is only birth into new life. And in that experience, as you touch upon God's presence, you will be freed from the spirit of grief, blessed in the holy recognition of that which your loved one has become in their birth into new life. Then it may be 5 minutes later that you encounter the spirit of grief once again. You release this captive into the fullness of God's loving embrace, and you move forward through the tears as God moves you from a tears of loss and suffering into a tear of joy and remembrance. But what you'll watch is if somebody does not embrace the attributes of God, they will be steeped even deeper into the spiritual process. From grief, they will move to confusion, sadness, regret, anger, unforgiveness, disillusionment. How could God take my bride from me, or whatever, what we start to embrace in these thoughts, because we are willing to foster, embrace, and hold prisoner within ourselves the captive that was the spirit of grief, which supports and sustains the spirit of anger, confusion, disillusionment. And you start to birth within yourself more and more of this spiritual influence. And as I received the different experiences coming in around the covenant and love, the different visions that God gave me to help me understand what was unfolding as miracles were happening, as I prayed over people on a massage table or I prayed over people standing still within a church, I saw things leaving. And I had to seek God to understand, what is it that you're showing me? And what was given to me was this awareness that this is why humanity walks on the periphery of my power, for they have lost sight of the order of the heavens and how they interact with one another. And it is important that we remember that God is a perfect, holy, and loving God. Therefore, God does not take from us those that we love, The spiritual influences and the captives that manifest upon this earth are the things that unfold in an unblessed or corrupt manner. And it is God that receives our loved ones with pure, perfect, loving embrace, restoration through wisdom, clarity, and renewal. So again, as we are walking this path, walking this journey, do we honestly align ourselves with spiritual belief that aligns with the nature of God's Spirit? Are we willing to embrace covenants, thoughts, and awarenesses that do not support and foster God, all the while saying we are believers, while we thrust these non-godly attributes upon others that they must believe? And in all humility, I have to come to you and say that within Grace Healing, we have a desire to serve every single person that reaches with any form of need. We hold no judgment over any person of any belief or any background. If they reach out saying, I need help, if they are standing in a homeless setting or situation, we embrace them within the fullness of love. We stand in the truth that it is God's Spirit within them that can rise up and free them from the spiritual influence that has put them in this place. For it is not God that casts them into this ground. It is the spiritual influence that they embrace within them, that they hold captive, because they embrace the story of this human existence above the story that was written by God. And God is omnipotent, omnipresent, in all places, at all things, and all times. Therefore, if God is love, purity, grace, peace, understanding, clarity, wisdom, and we see somebody before us that is not reflecting these attributes, it is they that are walking in blindness, not knowing that they are literally and actually the warden over their own prison, holding captives within. And to tie you back to a deeper understanding that we've shared before, Yeshua named them as spirits, and he named them as demonic. And when he said, if you release anything of a spirit nature or of a demonic nature, you must welcome the presence of God within, or many of like kind will return. And as I said to you, these deeper teachings within Grace Healing, what does that mean? When you have embraced and utilized within your life, let's say, for instance, the spirit of anger, as we've mentioned before, like some managers feel that they can get more out of their people by being angry, aggressive, and hostile toward them. When a person has done these things, but then they reach this point where they awake to God's presence and realize, wait a minute, this does not align with the Spirit of God. This does not fit the attributes of God. I release the spirit of anger. Remember that the spirit of anger, that captive known within the order of principalities, that prison, that captive known functioning, dwelling, and vibrating in the realm of anger, vibrationally, living that vibration. When that place is evacuated, returned into God's loving embrace, the spirit of anger is returned through love into God's loving embrace. God transforms it into the design that he holds for it and releases it back upon creation in a blessed form. The vibrational awareness within the human is now a pathway open into the spiritual realm that will foster like spirits that have functioned throughout humanity, known as the vibration of the spirit of anger. And it will manifest and rise within that same person unless they replace that ground with the presence of God, the breath of God's Spirit, the living awareness that God's love resides within this place. Therefore, many of like kind cannot return unto me. For I choose God within this place, and as I see this moment, this familiar nature that rises within me, that I wish to govern this situation through anger, I choose God first. And as I choose God, through all that Yeshua accomplished. For it is by Yeshua that all this has been made possible. I choose God and release that which is spiritual nature that has governed the nature of my thoughts, words, and actions. I choose God, that God governs the nature of my thoughts, words, and actions. And we will begin to see the greater things that Yeshua said we would accomplish. You will accomplish greater things than I as the Spirit of God dwells within you. So do you hear that? If you allow for the Spirit of God to dwell within you, the holy and living attributes of God to dwell within you complete and whole, then you will do greater things than He that overpowered, transformed, and made new all the heavens, which was Yeshua. And it was by His own words that He said, you will do greater things than I. Because the thing that He also understood is He was resident upon this earth with us, and He accomplished the miracles He did. Yet He had not yet entered the belly of the dead to set things right yet, and He knew that once He did enter upon the belly of the dead and set things right, that we would have the authority to do greater things than He did, because He took from Lucifer the keys to the heavens and ministered unto the dead. And that is our time today, which we have completely missed for the 2,000 years behind us, and I'm hoping we'll grasp it from these moments forward, to recognize that we have been given the keys to the heavens by Yeshua, to do greater things than He, so that when we look out upon the audience of the 1,000, we choose not judgment. We choose not the critical spirit. We choose God as we look into each and every single individual, knowing that God's presence is resident there, and we look to God's presence within to rise within them and transform all captives within, to move each person to a greater awareness of God within them and the holy attributes that could manifest within their words, thoughts, and actions. And we breathe. And Yadvela kutundre vis miserian, totor kabrumere serias miserian dereshnakaro. And I know at this time we are usually gifted with Ina's presence, but she is preparing to come up to Maine. I'll be picking her up at the airport tomorrow sometime mid-afternoon or something. And also this evening she's at a political event with Chris. As you know, he is running for office, and she will be out there this evening with him. So tonight's call, we will just surrender now into the prayer and trust and know that God's holy presence is fully resident within each and every one of you. And I pray in thanksgiving to know that God's Spirit can stir and make known the holy and living attributes of His Spirit within each and every breath that you receive, and that by favor and grace you would choose to embrace it above the experiences of the past or above any familiar nature we have formed within our actions. As we offer thanksgiving to your blessed and holy name. Yahweh, Elohim, Yedvianaki Fusuye Menede Yeshua, Van Palmier Kahaismas Uzlie, Abum. The triune nature of our Godhead, the perfect spirit, perfect flesh, and life-giving breath. May you be each blessed in a holy and restorative sleep, and we will have this posted within the next few days, depending upon our wonderful brother Andy and his time and availability. Have a blessed and holy night.